The sun hung low over the Montana prairie, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Sarah Mitchell sat beneath the old cottonwood tree, her bare feet stretched out before her on the dry grass. The hem of her pale dress was torn and dusty from the day's work. Blood stained the fabric near her shoulder, not her own, but from the calf she'd helped birth that morning. She didn't move to brush the dirt away. She simply sat, feeling the rough bark against her back, watching the horizon swallow the light. 20 yards away, James Crawford crouched in the dust, his weathered hands resting on his knees. His hat cast a shadow over his sun-darkened face. The horses stood patient behind him, their reins loose, their heads dipped low. The day's work was done. The cattle were settled. The ranch was quiet except for the whisper of wind through the fence posts. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with something unspoken, something that had been building for months like storm clouds gathering over distant mountains. Sarah had come to the Crawford ranch 3 years ago, after her father's death left her with nothing but debt and a wagon that barely made it across the state line. She'd knocked on the ranch house door looking for work, any work, and James had hired her without hesitation. He needed help. She needed a home. It was a simple arrangement. But nothing stayed simple for long. She'd learned to mend fences, to gentle skittish horses, to read the weather in the color of the morning sky. She'd learned the rhythm of ranch life, the early mornings, the hard labor, the bone-deep exhaustion that came with each sunset. And she'd learned James Crawford in the quiet moments between tasks. The way he moved through the world with steady purpose. The way he spoke few words but meant every one. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching. She looked at him now, sitting there in the fading light, and felt her heart pull against her ribs like a wild thing trying to break free. "James," she said quietly. He lifted his head. His eyes found hers across the distance. "I can't do this anymore," she continued, her voice barely carrying on the evening breeze. He stood slowly, his movements careful, as though he were approaching a frightened animal. He walked halfway to her and stopped. The space between them felt like a canyon. "Can't do what?" he asked. "This." She gestured vaguely at the air between them. "Pretending. Acting like there's nothing here when there's everything here." James removed his hat and held it in both hands. His dark hair was pressed flat against his head. He looked down at the hat, turning it slowly. "Sarah," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I know what you're going to say," she interrupted. "I know all the reasons. You're older than me. You're my employer. People would talk. I know all of it, James. I've told myself the same things every single day for 2 years. Then why? Because I'm tired," she said, and now there were tears sliding down her dusty cheeks. "I'm so tired of pretending I don't feel this. I'm tired of lying in my bed at night wishing you were there. I'm tired of watching you ride out each morning and worrying you won't come back. I'm tired of loving you in secret like it's something shameful." The word hung between them like a living thing. Love. James took 3 more steps toward her. He was close now, close enough that she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his hair at the temples, the way his jaw worked as he tried to find words. "Sarah," he said again. "I'm 42 years old. You're 25. You could." "Don't," she whispered. "Don't tell me what I could have. I know what I want. You could have a man who gives you a proper courtship. Dances and Sunday socials. Someone who just do it," she moaned, the words torn from somewhere deep inside her. "Stop talking and just do it. Kiss me. Hold me. Stop pretending you don't want this too." For a long moment, James Crawford stood frozen. Then, like a dam breaking, he moved. He crossed the last few feet between them and dropped to his knees in the dry grass beside her. His hands framed her face, rough and gentle all at once, and he kissed her like a man who'd been dying of thirst and had finally found water. Sarah's hands clutched his shirt, pulling him closer, feeling the solid warmth of him, the realness of him. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't another night of wishing. This was happening. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said roughly. "God help me, Sarah. I've loved you since the day you walked onto this ranch covered in road dust and too proud to beg. I've loved you through every sunrise and every storm. I've loved you and hated myself for it because you deserve better than a worn-out rancher with more years behind him than ahead. You're what I want, she said firmly. You're all I want. They sat together beneath the cottonwood as the stars began to appear overhead, one by one, like promises written in light. They talked about the future, about making their arrangement something more, something real and lasting. They talked about what people would say and decided they didn't care. They talked until the moon rose full and white over the prairie. When James finally walked Sarah back to the small cabin where she slept, he kissed her once more at the doorstep, soft and sweet and full of tomorrow. I'll talk to Pastor Williams in town this week, he said. If you're sure. I'm sure, Sarah replied. I've never been more sure of anything. She watched him walk back toward the main house, his figure dark against the moonlit yard, and felt something like joy unfold in her chest. 3 days later, Daniel Harper arrived. Sarah was hanging laundry when she saw the rider coming up the long road to the ranch. She didn't recognize the horse or the man at first. He sat tall in the saddle, his clothes fine, his hat clean. When he drew close enough for her to see his face, her hands went still on the wet sheet she'd been pinning to the line. Daniel, she breathed. He swung down from the horse with easy grace and stood before her, smiling that smile she remembered from a lifetime ago. Daniel Harper had been her father's business partner's son. They'd grown up together, running through the streets of St. Louis, splashing in the creek behind her father's house. They'd talked about marriage once, in that careless way young people do, before her father lost everything and Daniel's family moved to California. Hello, Sarah, he said warmly. I've been looking for you for 6 months. She took a step back, her mind reeling. What are you doing here? I came to find you. When I heard about your father's death, I tried to reach you, but you'd already gone. I've been following your trail ever since. He looked around at the ranch, his expression pleasant but appraising. Is this where you've been? Working as a ranch hand. I've been building a life, she said carefully. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. Daniel stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Sarah, I've done well in California. Very well. I have a successful freight business, a fine house in San Francisco. I've come to ask you to marry me. To take you away from all this. The sheet she'd been hanging flapped loose in the wind, forgotten. Sarah stared at Daniel Harper. Handsome Daniel, successful Daniel, Daniel who represented everything she might have had in another life, and felt nothing. No spark, no pull, just the distant echo of childhood affection. I can't, she said quietly. You haven't heard my offer yet, Daniel said with a laugh. Sarah, I can give you everything. Fine dresses, a real home, society, culture. You'd never have to work like this again. You'd never have to. I said I can't. Daniel's smile faltered. Why not? Because I'm in love with someone else. Behind them, footsteps crunched on the gravel. James had come from the barn, drawn by the sound of a stranger's voice. He stopped a few yards away, taking in the scene, Sarah standing there with her hands in another man's grip, a well-dressed stranger standing too close. Everything all right, Sarah? James asked quietly. Daniel turned, assessing James with a quick glance. His expression shifted, became something harder. You're in love with him. A ranch hand. He owns this ranch, Sarah said, pulling her hands free. And yes, I love him. Sarah, be reasonable. Look at what I'm offering compared to this. Daniel gestured around at the dusty yard, the weathered buildings, the endless prairie. I can give you a real future. I have a real future, she said. It's here. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. I rode 6 months to find you. I imagined something different. I'm sorry, Daniel, I truly am. You were a good friend once. But that life you're offering, it's not mine. Not anymore. Daniel looked between Sarah and James once more. Then he put his hat back on, his movements stiff. I'll be staying at the hotel in town tonight. If you change your mind. I won't, Sarah said gently but firmly. They watched him ride away, dust trailing behind his horse. When he disappeared over the rise, Sarah turned to James. She saw the question in his eyes, the uncertainty. There was never a choice, she said. Not really. He could give you everything I can't, James said quietly. He could give me everything I don't want. Sarah closed the distance between them. James, I didn't fall in love with you because you were the only option. I fell in love with you because of who you are. Because of how you treat your horses with kindness. Because you say what you mean. Because you look at me like I'm strong, not fragile. Because when I work beside you, I feel like I'm home. James pulled her close, holding her tight against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. I'm still going to talk to Pastor Williams, he murmured against her hair. Good, she said, because I'm not letting you out of this. But the next morning, when Sarah went into town for supplies, she saw Daniel Harper standing outside the general store. He looked like he'd been waiting. Sarah, he said, stepping into her path. Please, just hear me out one more time. Daniel, I can't stop thinking that you're making a mistake. That you're settling for less than you deserve because you don't think you have any other options. But you do. You have me. You've always had me. Sarah looked at this man who'd ridden 6 months to find her. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine care. And she understood, perhaps for the first time, that he really did love her in his own way. Daniel, she said gently. Do you remember when we were children, and you wanted to climb that big oak tree behind the church? Everyone said it was too dangerous, but you climbed it anyway. He nodded slowly. You did it because it was what you wanted, not because anyone told you to. You did it because something in you needed to climb that tree. She smiled sadly. This is my tree, Daniel. James is my tree, and I know everyone looking from the outside thinks I should choose the safe path, the comfortable path. But I'm choosing the path that makes me feel alive. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. He's a lucky man. I'm a lucky woman, Sarah replied. He tipped his hat to her. Be happy, Sarah Mitchell. That's all I ever wanted for you. She watched him walk away, watched him mount his horse and ride toward the stage station. This time, when he disappeared from view, it felt like a door closing on her old life. Not with regret, but with gratitude. That Sunday, Pastor Williams read the banns at the small church in town. James Crawford and Sarah Mitchell would be married in 3 weeks' time. The day of the wedding was clear and bright. Sarah wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself, white cotton with lace at the collar. James wore his best suit, the one he'd been married in once before, many years ago, to a woman who died in childbirth along with their son. He'd told Sarah about them one night, his voice quiet in the darkness, and she'd held his hand and understood that some griefs never fully healed. They just became part of who you were. The ceremony was small. A few neighboring ranchers attended, along with some folks from town. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, cried openly. Old Tom from the feed store played fiddle for the dancing afterward. When James took Sarah's hand and slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, he looked into her eyes and said, I promise to love you every day I have left on this earth. And if there's anything beyond, I'll love you there too. Sarah smiled through happy tears. That's all I'll ever need. That night, as they lay together in the big bed in the ranch house, her ranch house now, their ranch house, Sarah traced the lines of James's face in the moonlight streaming through the window. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently? She asked softly. No, James said honestly. Because you didn't. I could have had an easier life with Daniel. Maybe. But easier isn't always better. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. You chose the hard thing, Sarah. You chose the real thing. That takes more courage than most people have. Outside, the prairie stretched endless under the stars. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. The horses shifted in their stalls. The ranch breathed and settled into the night, and within it, 2 people who'd found each other against the odds held tight to what they'd built. Sarah thought about the girl she'd been, desperate and alone, knocking on this ranch house door 3 years ago. She thought about that moment under the cottonwood tree when she'd finally spoken the truth of her heart. She thought about Daniel Harper riding away, carrying with him the ghost of who she might have been in another life. And she felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this home. I love you, she whispered. I know, James replied, pulling her closer. I've always known. They fell asleep wrapped around each other as the moon traced its arc across the sky, as it had done for 1,000,000 years before them and would do for 1,000,000 years after. Two souls who'd found their way home at last. And in the morning, they would wake and work side by side, building their life together one day at a time, one fence post at a time, one sunrise at a time. It was enough. It was everything.